it out.
Okay. Monique, she does that to us every time. Good morning, intrepid winter travelers. It's nice to see those of you who are here. It's nice to see those of you who are on Facebook. Good morning, good morning. I'm Reverend C.C. Coltrane. Welcome to Center for Spiritual Living, Greater Dayton. We're glad you're here with us today. Our mission is to be a community of love that supports everyone in real transformation. And it's so nice to have Monique Cooper back with us this morning, isn't it? Along with this amazing Higher Mind band. Yeah. You guys are wonderful. Since only a few of us have braved our driveways, this morning Stephanie is going to offer our reading and invocation, and Stephanie and Leah are going to do our candle lighting, our interfaith candle lighting, which reminds us that there's wisdom in all sorts of places that we can use right now in our lives today. And our youth teacher got stuck. Her garage door will not open this morning, so the kids are going to be hanging out with us in the service today. And if they decide to run around and sing, that is simply the song of God. That's what I say. Don't forget to sign up for classes. We have 2 classes beginning in January, 5 Gifts of an Abundant Life and the Power of Your Word. Both will jumpstart your life. So you can sign up over on the bulletin board. And otherwise, take a look at your bulletin insert and see what's coming up. There's a winter snow day that we hope is warmer than it is today. Coming up in next Saturday. Ooh, next Saturday. Next week's the last weekend in January.
Yay.
How does this happen, though? January goes by as fast as every other month, right? Well, except February. February is a short month that seems really long. But the way it's going lately, it won't be long at all. So there's a couple of other things coming up. Check your bulletin insert, and there's really something going on every single week around here. We have a couple of practitioners who will be available to pray with you after the service. If you need prayer for something, just walk up and ask one of them. And they're wearing the white or teal stoles, and they will be happy to find a time and a place to pray with you. So I'm going to sit down again, and we're going to hear some more music. This is a who wrote Kenny Loggins song. That's right, called "Conviction of the Heart."
We light the first candle to honor Christianity. What a person plants, they will harvest. One who plants selfishness, ignoring the needs of others, harvests a crop of weeds. We light the second candle to honor Taoism. Knowing others is intelligence. Knowing yourself is true wisdom. Mastering others is strength. Mastering yourself is true power. We light the third candle to honor Judaism. There is one respect in which each of us has precisely the same strength as Moses, namely the strength to choose. There is no hand of heaven, no physiological, genetic, psychological, or providential compulsion that forces us to act one way rather than another. We light the fourth candle to honor Buddhism. Irrigators channel waters, fletchers straighten arrows, carpenters bend wood, the wise master themselves. We light the fifth candle to honor Islam. O my servants, it is only your deeds that I record for you and then recompense for you. So let one who finds good praise Allah, and let one who finds other than good blame no one but themselves. We light the sixth candle to honor the spirituality of the Navajo. Be careful when speaking. You create the world around you with your words. And we light the final candle to honor Hinduism. The wind is blowing. Those vessels whose sails are unfurled catch it and go forward on their way. But those which have their sails furled do not catch the wind. Is that the fault of the wind? Thank you, Leah. Today's reading comes from Reverend Nancy Collier. Amazingly, in the moments when we have the strength to choose love over fear, We are rewarded not only with the knowledge and confidence that we have done something incredibly challenging and beautiful, but also with the gift of experiencing ourselves as love, as something infinitely more than just the small, fragile ego we thought we were. We are rewarded with a freedom that surpasses all other freedoms. Ultimately, it is through our willingness to stop defending our idea of ourselves that we discover our true and indestructible self. Let's take these words into silence and contemplation for a few moments. So centered here in this place of power and love and safety, I'm grateful. I see clearly that everyone present and everyone that can hear us now, that we are willing. We are willing to see and become what we truly are. Our indestructible self, our true self, our highest self. That is God expressing. And so I know that this service is exactly as it should be. That all hear the message that is theirs to hear. That we all are here to choose love, to be love, and to remember our oneness and our wholeness. And for that I am infinitely, infinitely grateful. And so it is.
So today I want to talk about choosing to live from love rather than from fear. This month we're talking about taking ownership of our lives, and there is no more powerful thing we can do, I think, than to choose consciously and actively to live from love instead of from fear. And it sounds really easy, but if it were easy, we wouldn't have war, we wouldn't have poverty, we wouldn't have hatred, we wouldn't have divisiveness in our world, because choosing love over fear is the most powerful thing we can do, but it isn't what we're sort of conditioned to do. It's not easy because we're conditioned from birth to fear. I mean, think about it. Our parents are afraid we're going to fall down the stairs or put our hand on a hot burner or run out in traffic. I understand all that, but they let us know in no uncertain terms that life is dangerous and that we ought to be afraid of it from the time before we're even crawling. And if they have their own sets of fears, they communicate them wordlessly to us, don't they? And our parents strap us into helmets and knee pads and elbow pads and everything else when we ride our tricycles or go out on our roller skates. It led me to believe that it must be dangerous to be physically active. So for a long time I avoided it. Actually, maybe it was the basketball that broke my nose that convinced me of that, but regardless. Our parents and our media tell us not to talk to strangers because strangers are dangerous. The whole idea that the world is a dangerous place is pretty constantly reinforced when you're a little kid. Unless we had really conscious parents who explained to us carefully what the risks really were and didn't hold us too tightly when we wanted to go exploring. They kept us safe but not constrained. And we're physically made to notice what's scary first, too. As we evolved, in evolutionary terms, parts of our brain are very, very old. More evolved animals like us kept the older parts of the brain and just added some stuff on top, basically. So we have 3 parts to the brain. We have the brain stem, the reptilian brain, which keeps our bodies going in homeostasis. Then we have this thing called the paleo-mammalian brain, which means the really old mammal. We have this really old mammalian brain, which is where fear arises. And then on top of that we have the cortex, the thinking part, the most recent part of our brain. But it's this paleo-mammalian brain, the limbic system, which is about stimulation, mostly of fear, but also those other kinds of stimulation. Memory and emotion, and that's where fear begins. Our fear response goes like that. It's very quick. It's very quick. It needs to be, right? If you step out into traffic and there's a car speeding at you, you best not think about it too long before you get out of the way. Or if you're a small mammal and there's something about to step on you, you don't have time to think, you just have to get out of the way. That happens way before the thought about the situation happens. It's a really instantaneous kind of thing, and it helps our bodies survive actual physical danger. The issue exists, therefore, because we're wired to be alert to danger, and because we're conditioned to one extent or another to be afraid of the world, to fear what's going on, to fear living, actually. So unless we've worked to sort of loosen loosen that notion that the world is a scary place, our first reaction and our first response is often fear. And fear makes us do crazy stuff. It makes us do crazy stuff. It's fear that makes people act violently towards others. It was fear that made that kid stand in the face of that Native American elder who was trying to chant a peace song. It's fear that makes people overreact. It's fear that drives hatred. It's fear that the media is all about. You know, what they report most of the time is the news. And it's news because it's rare. They don't report the vast majority of what's going on, which is good or okay. It's certainly not dangerous, right? And some media report what they call the news as a way to connect with their viewers' primitive fears. So much of our fear is totally irrational, though. If you're not standing in traffic, it's not likely you have to jump out of the way of a speeding car. We no longer have dinosaurs and such wandering around that may step on us and we have to run away from quickly. Most of the things we react to do not require our fear. They just don't. But that's how we're conditioned. There's an old story about a man who's walking down the road towards home at dusk and he sees a snake in the road. It's actually an old piece of rope. But in his mind it's a snake. And he's terrified and he stops dead and he can't take another step farther and he's sweating and he's wondering what to do, and he picks up some pebbles and throws them at the rope and imagines that he sees this snake moving, and he's just terrified, he's paralyzed. And another man comes by and says, "What's up?" And he says, "There's a snake in the road and I can't get by it. I can't get home and my wife is expecting me." And the man says, "Oh, I think it's a rope." And the other man says, "No, it moved, I saw it." So the man finally takes the guy by the arm and leads him over and walks over and picks up this old piece of rope and shows him that it is simply a rope. How much of our lives do we live in fear of things that aren't real? How often are our snakes just pieces of old rope? A lot of the time, I think. Most of the time. Somewhere there's a sane balance here, right? Between living in fear of rope and a healthy respect for snakes. Somewhere in between those two is the place of balance and the place we should land. And we find that balance by knowing ourselves. By knowing ourselves and having enough control over our impulses to calm ourselves long enough to investigate. Is this a snake or a rope? When we're diving deeply into ourselves, which we talked about even last week on Snowmageddon weekend, we talked about it via Facebook, you know, about being honest enough to see what's really there and having a willingness to be really honest in our self-investigations. And when we do that, we come up upon these places where we have sort of pockets of fear that exist in our own minds. You know, maybe it's heights. That's one for me. Maybe it's spiders. Maybe it's people with scars on their faces. Maybe it's people of a different religion or a different ethnicity or a different culture background or a different sexual or gender identity. Maybe we fear other people's anger. Maybe we fear poverty or homelessness or isolation and loneliness. Psychotherapists have lots of ways to get over fear. or to help us get over fear. The first is to stop worrying so much about why you're afraid and simply acknowledge that you are. I have this fear in my mind, period. Just acknowledging that it's there gives us back the energy we spend dodging it. You know, I don't want to acknowledge that fear, so I'm going to run over here, and nope, here it comes, I'm going to run over here. We spend a lot of energy dodging it. Just acknowledge that it's there. Everybody's got them. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. Just acknowledge it. The second is to learn about what you fear. You know, I used to have a real thing about snakes. And then I worked in a herpetology lab, which is the study of reptiles, right? We had dead snakes in jars, we had live snakes. One day I was working quietly at my desk, and one of the graduate students had this great big long, like 8-foot long, black and yellow snake. It was a blow-up snake. It was a toy. But he pushed it around the corner with its head coming up. I jumped on my desk and screamed so loud, and I thought, I work in a herpetology lab. I should really get over this. So I signed up to feed the snakes and the turtles. We had these weird Australian turtles with long, snaky necks that kind of snap the food out of your hand. So I volunteered to feed them. And for the first couple of times, the professor had to come in with me and keep me calm. But after a while, I started to really admire these critters. Snakes are amazing. I would not, were I hiking in the Rocky Mountains, walk up and pet a rattler. But I have a healthy awe for reptiles in general now. And it all happened because some silly fool with a blow-up snake decided to try and scare the you-know-what out of me and succeeded. I was standing on my desk screaming. We learn about things and we stop fearing them, particularly if we approach the object of the fear slowly and cautiously and then spend a little more time. From a spiritual standpoint, what all the teachers have told us is once you come to know someone or something, you come to love it, and you cannot fear what you love. You cannot fear what you love. I'm not talking about what's sometimes called love, but it's really neurotic attachment. The abused spouse who claims to love the abuser, that's not love, that's neurotic attachment. I'm not talking about that. And when I say neurotic, that's not a slur, that's simply a shorthand for mistaken. And that kind of situation isn't resolved by coming closer to the abuser. I'm talking about the other kind of love, the love that we have for everything in our world once we begin to explore it and know it. The love you get for the forest after you've walked in the forest a couple of times. The love we have for snowflakes once we have seen them magnified and understand how perfect and individual each one of them is. The love we have for lions and tigers and bears once we know something about them and have seen them up close. The love I have for reptiles now that I've been around them and their quirky little personalities. They really are quirky. Each one is individual. The love for people we have once we sit down and have a conversation with them. Once we come to know them, we love them, and we can no longer fear them. I know this to be true. This love is far, far more powerful than any fear. This love is incredibly powerful. If we start to choose and use the power of that kind of love, fear sort of steps aside. It's still there, but it's not running our lives any longer. When we choose love instead of fear, then we let our consciousness, which is way larger and way more powerful than our brain, we let our consciousness introduce us to what's beautiful out there. And we never would have met it had we stayed in fear. Because we circumscribe our lives, don't we? I'm not going this way because I could run into something scary, and I can only go 2 steps this way because there might be something scary over there. But if we're willing to meet it all with love, that border just goes away. I thought I turned the ringer off. My pardon me. You know, we learn to be a little bit bigger when we don't give in to our fear. When we begin to choose to use and live by the power of love. The other thing is that choosing love helps us decondition ourselves from fear. The fear that we've got that's sitting deep inside of us. It makes our physical lives easier because fear is hard on you. Have you noticed? It makes your adrenaline go crazy and your cortisol go crazy and your muscles quake, and it's not a pretty thing to walk through. It makes our mental lives easier, makes our spiritual lives easier to simply choose to live from love. And it is the very basis of faith. It is the very basis of faith. It's the basis of the faith that reminds us that we're in spirit and of spirit and that we live as spirit. That lets us become all we came here to be and to do all that we came here to do. It's an act of courage and power and faith. And tomorrow's Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, and he reminded us that faith is taking the first step even when we can't see the whole staircase. And the basis of that is love. We step onto the staircase of love. We may not know where it's taking us, but we take that step anyway. We take that step anyway. I like today's reading a lot. She says, amazingly, in the moment when we have the strength to choose love over fear, we're rewarded not only with the knowledge and confidence that we have done something incredibly challenging and beautiful, but also with the gift of experiencing ourselves as love, as something infinitely more than just the small, fragile, I would add, frightened ego we thought we were. We are rewarded with the freedom that surpasses all other freedoms. Yeah, if we can get rid of our fear, we are freer than we've ever been, right? Ultimately, it's through our willingness to stop defending our idea of ourselves that we discover our true and indestructible self. It's a great reading. Choosing love over fear lets us get close enough to the object of our fear to know it, to really know it. We make that initial loving step, and we get close enough to see that this is a person who is one with us. This is our brother, this is our sister, this is our daughter, or our son, or our grandmother, or a mother, and we can start to talk to them and come to love them, and then there is no fear at all. It lets us get close enough. If we've been afraid of someone because they're Muslim or gay or the other side of the political spectrum or whatever the difference we focus on, when we choose to let love lead us, we find ourselves talking with them and getting to know about them and coming to understand them. And all that leads to us loving them as ourselves. Just the great commandment, right? That was the great commandment. Knowing that they too are an embodiment of spirit, as are we. So, if we're not letting fear push us around, but instead we're choosing love to guide our footsteps, we find ourselves walking into our own courageousness in a way we've never experienced before. We find ourselves walking into our own evolution, our own transformation. We could do things we could never do if we stayed in fear. We really own our own lives when we live from love rather than fear. I ran across a little thing this weekend in our one of our ministerial classes, which was all about the teachings of Ernest Holmes, and it was so cute. I want to share it with you. It was Ernest Holmes talking about love, and he said, "You and I would not know of the limitless possibility of the meaning of love if we loved only 2 or 3 people. But I can imagine what a terrific thing it'd be when I love a great many people, when I love all people, as well as I love those I love the most, without loving those I love the most any less. But that's too big for me now. I'm a little lover," he said. "But I'm telling you of a dynamic truth. and I know it to be true. The kick you get out of those you love, the feeling you have towards them, someday you may expect to have toward everyone you see. Isn't that love? He said. I really like that. He's calling us into something bigger, isn't he? He's calling us to be bigger than we've been, to have a love that's greater than we've had, a vision wider than we've had before. He's calling us to choose love in every moment. You know, fear is the thing that makes someone our enemy, and love is the thing that makes someone our neighbor, our friend. When whether the fear is that, you know, we've decided someone else is better than we are, and therefore we feel diminished somehow, whether it's we've decided that somebody's different than ourselves and somehow they're going to upset our apple cart, whatever it is. But when we choose love instead of that fear, it changes everything. It clears our vision so that we see that it's that person's difference from us that makes them unique. But it doesn't doesn't sever the connection that we have with everything and all life and people everywhere. That connection remains. We can see that someone as our brother or sister or other relative instead of someone that we need to compete with or denounce or be angry at. Again, Martin Luther King, he said, love is the only force capable of transforming an enemy into a friend. It is the only force capable of transforming an enemy into a friend. And I actively go in search of good news, because the stuff that the mainstream media puts out is all the other stuff. And I can't tell you how many stories I've read of enemies becoming friends because they chose only one of them. One of them chose the power of love. I think you all heard me talk before about Immaculée, can't remember her last name. She was in Rwanda and she was in a bathroom with 14 other people for 9 months, waiting for the slaughter outside to surpass. Her whole family was killed. And afterwards she found the people that had done it and forgave them. And I just read another similar story from the same time in the world. Woman, her hand was cut off and her child was killed. And she started a farm with the men who had done that as an act of love. And now they're friends. You know, so many things that we think of as irreparable and unforgivable and absolutely unlovable are healed when one person takes the first step onto that stairway. It's all it takes. That is all it takes. And once again, that quote from Martin Luther King, love is the only force capable of transforming an enemy into a friend. I mean, why on earth would we like to collect enemies, right? Why wouldn't we instead turn them into friends? How wonderful it is to have friends. How wonderful it is to have someone that will be there if we need help, or will be there if we just need to talk, someone to listen, or will celebrate our wins with us instead of us sitting alone wondering why we don't have anybody to celebrate with. It is our choosing love that will create friends out of enemies. And it's up to us. It's up to each one of us. It's a choice we make as an outlook on life. It is a choice we make when we feel ourselves making someone the other. We can change it in the moment. We can change it as soon as our human brain catches up with our mammal or mammalian brain and says, it's a rope, not a snake. Gonna go make friends with the rope, right? Even when our precious little limbic systems put us into fight or flight mode, we can take a breath, check to see if it's really a danger, and if the danger is not there, I mean, don't make any friends with buses that are speeding your way, right? If you let the conscious mind catch up, then you know what to do. As Martin Luther King Jr. reminds us, that's the only thing that can make friends out of enemies. If there's no danger, there's nothing to fear, right? There's nothing to fear. If there's nothing to fear, the proper response is love. Because there's only one of us here. Jesus said, the new commandment is this, love one another. And Paul said, the whole law is fulfilled in one word. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. So if there is no real danger, the only proper response, the only appropriate response, the only response from the inside of ourselves, rather than something we believe that's not true, the only response is to choose love. So let's pray, shall we? Let's come together in consciousness with this idea that when we choose love over fear, we step into our power and our courage. We step into our true selves. There is only one of us. There is only one everywhere, in every moment of time. A power and a presence, an intelligence and a love that, in order to express itself, creates. It has created every cell in my body. It has created every atom of every cell in my body. It has created every atom I breathe in, every atom I breathe out, every star, every planet, every galaxy, and way out at the edge of the universe. At its furthest reaches, it's still creating. It's causing time and space to expand so that it can express itself more and more and more. And it lives within me, and it lives within each one of us as consciousness, as the very highest part of this thing I call my mind, as the very deepest part of this thing I call myself, as the very greatest part. It is this thing I call my soul. It is spirit moving in me and as me and through me and in and as and through each person here and each person who's hearing this message today. We are all part of this one that goes by so many names. I call it God because that's the easiest way for me to describe it. It is indescribable. It is infinite. It is powerful beyond words. And it is loving beyond measure. And we are all in it and of it. All that we are is that. Thou art that. And so I know that we are always at choice, because that is one of the gifts this creative energy and intelligence has given us. We can always choose. And so I speak a word for each of us that we choose love. We choose love first. Fear may rise up, but then we choose. We choose love. We choose to look and see if this is really a rope or a snake. And if it's a rope, to make friends with it. If it's a snake that's harmless, to make friends with it too. If there really is no danger, to take courageous and bold and open steps in love to come closer to that which we do not know, to allow our curiosity to let us get to know it, to allow our knowing to bring us to love. For love is the power that changes everything. If and as we choose love, we turn those who might be enemies into friends. If and as we choose love, we change our whole country into one that reaches out to make friends so that enemies disappear. As we choose love, we change our whole world. As we continue to choose love, and as more and more and more of us consciously choose to take the first step on the staircase of love, our world becomes that which is our vision, a world that truly works for everyone. For if there is enough love, no one goes hungry. If there is enough love, no one is disenfranchised. If there is enough love, no one need be homeless. If there is enough love, no one need be at war. If there is enough love, we multiply the good. And so right now I know that we choose love. We choose love. We choose love. And I call that amazing and wonderful and beautiful beyond words. And I give thanks. I give thanks that we are here together on this cold winter day. Warm in heart, warm in community, warm in love. I give thanks for all that goes on this day and for everything that comes of our choosing love. I bless it. I make it a force for good in the world by my words of blessing. And I let it be so. I simply release it. Knowing that that infinite power and intelligence of love is backing us all the way. It's already done. And it simply happens, comes into form through us. Thank you, God. And so it is. So it is. Amen.
Just a thread, a simple thread in this glorious web of life. We are all just drops within a stream, flowing towards an ocean of light. We may forget where we come from. We may forget where we're going to. I might not see that you're a reflection of me as much as I'm a reflection of you. I am just a seed, seed with eternity unfolding in me, and I pray that as I grow, I will reveal the love that illuminates my soul. When I remember where I come from, when I remember
now have an opportunity to contribute, those of you who are here, to our community. Every contribution you make is a contribution to us as community and to yourself as being here in a place of transformation. So just look at someone near you and say, I make this contribution for you. I make this contribution for me. We're community. And together we move forward. And so it is. Fabulous music today, by the way. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Really good. Especially that one. I had hairs on the back of my neck standing. Ooh, I love that. Thank you all for coming out today. It's a beautiful... I just can't take him anywhere. Thank you all for coming out today on this beautiful, sunny, but cold day. Stay warm. If you shovel, be careful. Don't pull any muscles or anything. Thanks to all of our volunteers. We so appreciate. Thank you, Gary, for shoveling before we all got here.
Leah, too, and her son.
Yeah. Oh, yes, Leah and her son, who first were shoveling the walks. Thank you all. Kathy Rice, as always, is shoveling everything, right? Thank you all. I really appreciate it. Thanks to Stephanie and Leah again, and everyone who did anything today. It's really appreciated. And thanks to you on Facebook. It's good to be with you today. Let's close with an affirmation, and our closing song is One Love, right? One Love by Bob Marley. Stand up. Come on. Repeat after me, please. Today I choose love.
Today I choose love.
I let love guide my thoughts.
I let love guide my thoughts.
I let love guide my words.
I let love guide my words.
I let love guide my actions.
I let love guide my actions.
Everyone I see is my friend.
Everyone I see is my friend.
Thank you, God.
Thank you, God.
And so it is.